Welcome to the Nursing Post podcast, All Nursing All the Time with Ashley and Rosa. Today, our episode is going to focus on a topic that you don't hear discussed very much. It's the fact that 1 in 6 men are victims and survivors of sexual abuse. Our goal is always to inform and help start conversation.
This conversation is a really important conversation that's really needing to be discussed. It's not a happy topic, but most times when people speak out about sexual assault or abuse, we tend to correlate women,
Mm-hmm.
being the survivor and the victim. But that's far from the truth because boys and men are also victims of assault. This is so under-discussed that the statistics are believed to be low and underreported, as many boys and or men do not report their assaults. I thought going into this that I would be able to find like tons and tons of information,
There's a lot out there for women.
but not so much for men. So this kind of just goes back to that thought process that I have, that it's really being underreported and not discussed enough. At least 1 in 6 men have experienced sexual assault or abuse, according to the CDC. One of the websites that I was able to find information is called 1in6.org. And according to them, 16% of a 2003 national study of US adults reported that 14.2% of men were sexually abused before the age of 18. A study of males in a university in the Boston area reported that 18% of men who were sexually abused were abused before the age of 16. And only 16% of men with documented histories of sexual abuse even considered themselves to be abused. So this right there just leads me to believe the issue is that men do not know, and it is underreported. If
Mm-hmm.
this last statistic
That's
says
sad.
it is, it's like, how do you not know that you've been violated?
Well, is it that they don't know, or they just don't
They
want to
don't
be
consider themselves.
they don't want to be grouped into that? Like they don't want a stigma attached to them. So they're like, no, no, no,
Exactly.
no, 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 that wasn't me, type of thing. Like, no, that I wouldn't consider that abuse or assault, just because they don't want like that stigma attached to them, like something's wrong with them, or
Mhm.
that they're, part of that. It's that one statement says so much.
It's the reason why we're doing this podcast episode, because the goal truly is to inform and for us to talk about this so that it's no longer a stigmatism.
Mm-hmm.
We tell women all the time that they are not the cause of their situation.
Mm-hmm.
We should be telling the same thing to men.
Well, to any person that is a victim of
Period.
assault, period.
Period. As young ladies, we're taught, stranger danger, no means no, and what an uncomfortable touch is. And growing up, my mother had this conversation with me, but it wasn't until like I was a parent of, my daughter, I had that conversation with her. But then when I had a son, I realized this topic of sexual abuse is even more so important to have necessarily than the one that I have with my daughter,
Mm-hmm.
especially after reading all of these statistics. And I can assure you, I've had these conversations with both of them. Why? A lot of reasons. More children are being abused. It doesn't matter if they're male, female, non-binary children are being kidnapped. They're becoming victims of sex trafficking and child pornography. And the most alarming part of this is that it's not always a stranger. So even though I grew up in the generation of stranger danger, it's not always a stranger. So
Well,
we need to reanalyze.
how you're teaching this to your children. And
Absolutely.
there was one study in the United States that found that women were responsible for 19% of child sexual abuse committed, and they were in positions of trust. So they were not strangers.
No, they're not strangers. And, you know, in our mind, I think we try to tell ourselves that
Hmm.
to make the medicine go down smoother, but that's not the case. How many times have any of us turned on the television and, seen a child go missing or be an Amber Alert? How many times have we seen where there has been an unfavorable outcome? They were victims of assault or abuse, or they were recovered.
Oh, well, and there was a young lady that went missing years ago. Her body has never been recovered. I mean, there's somebody in jail for her murder, but
Absolutely. It happened in this area, and I know
yep,
exactly who you're talking about.
yep,
And they still have not found her, and he is in jail, and he will not give up the information.
nope.
So it's important that this conversation is had. It's not just because of what you turn on the TV. We've had scandals for years,
Oh,
starting with
absolutely. But my thing with that, the reason I brought it up is he's willing to go to jail and
never get out.
never get out because he won't give that information. So they pretty much threw the book at him. My first thought was, well, what else is he hiding?
Probably a lot more bodies.
I mean, really, that was my first thing is how
Yeah.
many other young people are missing? And I wonder if that person wasn't the cause or if it's more than one people involved. I think that was
Mhm.
um thought to be the case with this. It wasn't a one person kind of thing, which is just it's sickening and yeah, but
Disgusting.
that
I
doesn't give that
mean,
family closure. It sucks.
and unfortunately, until they may never have
No.
closure just because a body's recovered. You can't grapple and you can't rationalize why something that devastating had to have happened. You know what I mean?
I guess
That's a it's just hard.
yeah, but as a parent, like are you going to trust this person on the stage on the trial? No, no, we're not. So without that body, to me, it would be hard to be like, yeah, they're really gone. They're really gone. Even
Yeah,
if
it's
somebody says,
very,
oh, yeah, I
very
killed her. Like, but did you really? Did you not sell her? Did you not do something? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's
and
so many.
I was going to bring up, just last month when we turned on the television, there was a news article that was on the local channel about children that were found for sex trafficking,
Mhm.
and they, intervened and saved those children. And that's in our little local communities,
Which is
that
very
that was
small.
discovered. It's very small. So,
Think about these bigger areas,
absolutely.
churches, the whole Boy Scout thing. Like, I just
There are
can't.
predators everywhere.
Yes.
And these predators are not strangers. That's the point that I'm like really trying to hit home here.
Hmm.
The churches, because I know everybody wants to pinpoint this one particular religion, but it's not. There have been churches of denominations that have had some serious scandals. And
Yes,
they're not, to me, this isn't scandals, these are crimes.
they are.
And that goes the same Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, whatever scout you're in, brownies, Girl Scouts, whatever have you. These people are not strangers. These
No.
are trusted people in positions of authority.
Yes.
And we all know one of the most famous incidences of female predator child inappropriate relationship was Mary Kay Letourneau. She was the first televised female to be accused and found guilty of molesting her student. The sad thing is in 2015, 100 women were convicted of sexual assault. She definitely brought a light to it. And it's now just, I think, hitting the cusp that more women are being brought to the forefront. And among those convicted, are school staff, which include teachers and, you know, coaching assistants, teachers, aides. These are people that, we're sending our children to school to every single day and
Hmm.
trusting them with your most prized possession.
Oh, absolutely. So the biggest question that you would have for anybody is, well, what point would you think that you should not have this conversation with your son? I mean, it really is about educating on what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and the need to immediately tell, you know, a different trusting adult, whether that's a parent or somebody else, that there is a problem, that this is inappropriate behavior that's happening.
This conversation is not just it's just not for girls.
No.
It's for sons too. And not only that, when you're sitting down and you're having this conversation with your son, not only are you telling them about what's not appropriate for them, but you're teaching them during this conversation and this educational moment, what not to do
Oh, absolutely.
to others.
One of the reasons that male sexual violence is so underreported is because of the shame and stigma that's attached to assault. So the statistic that only 16% of men with documented histories of some type of sexual abuse or assault consider themselves to actually have had any assault or abuse at all.
Mhm.
And we keep bringing that up because it really pushes forward why there's a problem and how we need to be educating these young men, boys, and even older men that this is assault, this is abuse, and it is important and it should be reported.
Well, the conversation that we need to have with our children has to start at home,
Yes.
but then it needs to continue. Our school programs now include sexual education. And I can tell you, I'm telling my age, when I was in school, we did have conversations about sexual education, but we never had conversations about improper sex.
I'm trying to remember if I did or not. I don't recall it off the top of my head. So if there was something that was in there, it's not anything significant enough for me to remember that
To
it's.
recall it.
Mm-mm.
And so, I mean, we teach about sexual education, we teach about abstinence, we teach about safe sex, but we need to also be teaching, about sexual assault and abuse,
Mhm.
um, what it is and where to go for help. And we need to normalize talking about this uncomfortable subject so that it doesn't stay an
Mhm.
uncomfortable subject.
So there are some warning signs that you can look out for. We've kind of grouped them a little bit into sections. So we'll start with some physical signs. So any STIs or STDs or sexually transmitted infections, signs of trauma to any of the genitalia, which could be unexplained bleeding, bruising, blood on the sheets, blood on the underwear, clothing, anything like that that's not normal
Mhm.
is an issue. And boys don't have periods, so guess what? Should not be blood in the underwear.
I agree 1000%.
Some behavioral problems that could arise is excessive talk or knowledge about sexual topics, keeping secrets, or not being their normal talkative self. not wanting to be left alone with certain people, or being afraid to be away from like a primary caregiver, especially if it's been fine for a while and then all of a sudden there's an issue. That's a red flag. Regressive behaviors, or if you feel like, we haven't dealt with this in a year, why are we going backwards? That's a regressive behavior. If you have a child that
Yeah.
used to have trouble with bedwetting and then they stop and then all of a sudden they're doing that again, that's a regression and that needs to be looked into. um Overly compliant behavior. We may think, oh, it'd be so great if our kids would just listen and do what we told them to do the first time. There is not a child out there that does that. And if there is a child that does that, there's probably something mentally not right with that child.
Mm.
Kids are going to push
They're just
boundaries.
naturally
They're going to
push
see what they,
boundaries,
yes.
rebellious,
So if
be a
kids
little
are always
lippy.
like, yes, 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 sure, and they're jumping up doing what they're doing, to me, I would be like, that's not right. Like that would just be weird to me. Like your kids never give you any lip,
I would be like, okay, who is this child and what have you done with mine?
well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I understand, like I have two completely different kids and one is listens a heck of a lot more than the other one. But it doesn't mean that she doesn't give her input and thought and, well, do I have to do it right now kind of thing. That's what we mean. But if they're just super compliant, that's a problem. Any kind of sexual behavior that's inappropriate for the child's age would be a red flag. Spending unusual amounts of time alone, or trying to avoid, taking a bath, things like that. Like, oh, I don't want you to see me. That starts to happen naturally at puberty, like I need
Hmm.
privacy.
Knowing their behaviors, their patterns,
Hmm.
just really knowing them.
Hmm.
If you are not emotionally involved or physically involved in being a parent, then you're not going to be able to pick up on a lot of these cues.
Right. The last part here is some emotional changes. This could be changes in eating habits, changes in mood or personality, like increased aggression, a decrease in self confidence or self image, excessive worry or being very fearful, increase in unexplained health problems, headaches, stomach aches. That's seen a lot with bullying as well. You can kind of see a correlation there. A loss or decrease in interest at school, activities, or friends, nightmares or fear of being alone at night, or any kind of self harming behaviors.
There are warning signs for teens and adolescents: unusual weight gain or weight loss, unhealthy eating patterns like a loss of appetite or, overeating, excessive eating, signs of physical abuse such as bruises, sexually transmitted infections or diseases, signs of depression, such as like persistent sadness, lack of energy, changes in their sleep or their appetite. They're starting to withdraw from their normal activities. Maybe they were the social butterfly, and now you notice that they're not going out with their friends and they're feeling blue and down, more than they were before. They're now anxious and, worry warts, and their grades are starting to suffer. You're starting to notice changes in their self care. Like maybe they were really into being well groomed and well shaved and all this, and now they're starting to really not care about their appearance or, their fashion or their hygiene. Maybe they have started to self harm, and they're expressing thoughts about suicide or having behaviors of suicidal ideology. Substance abuse, whether it's drinking alcohol or smoking cigarettes or using drugs, these are all warning signs that something is not right. And as um, parents, teachers, medical professionals, it's our job It's our job. We're mandated reporters, and it's our job, to make sure that we're taking care of our children. And it's important to get help.
There's a couple of different ways that somebody can reach out if they need to get help. If you know somebody, or if you yourself are hearing this and you are a victim, there is a 24-hour crisis hotline, which is 1-800-656-HOPE. And that is 1-800-656-4673. The RAIN, which is spelled RAINN app, gives survivors of sexual violence and their loved ones access to support for self-care tools, information to help manage short-term and long-term effects, because there is a lot of psychological problems that could really start to develop from
Mhm.
being assaulted.
It doesn't go away. People that are victims aren't only victims, every day is survival. So they are survivors, and they will need help and treatment because this is something that will never go away. And it's one of the reasons why, we need to discuss it and normalize having the conversations. As I always say, the more we know, the more we grow. And if we know what we're looking for, and we can better help not only our children, but our patients and our students. You can find our references on our website, thenursingpostpodcast.com, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. We love that you share your thoughts and opinions there too. So thanks again for listening to the Nursing Post.